that opportunity
Yep.
to provide those services so that the money can remain in Guyana. But instead our leaders, my friend, instead our leaders not telling us nothing. All you're hearing from them is, oh, we have to investigate the 25,000 what poor people get. Yeah. Nothing you're hearing from these people. And we are losing billions upon billions upon billions of dollars every single day. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, guy.
The time has now moved on to 12 hours 1. You're listening to Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. That was an edition of the Glenn All Show. We will continue, but just after our main newscast.
This is the news on top of the hour.
Live from our studio in Georgetown.
Kaieteur Radio 99.1 FM.
Hello, thank you for tuning in to Kaieteur Radio. I'm Kevin Smith.
And I'm Amrita Koshal.
Welcome to your news at noon for Friday, December 31st, 2021. These are the top stories we are tracking. Dr. Ashni Singh justifies 2-week review period for flawed oil fund law. It says penalties for abuse covered under other legislation. Meanwhile, Speaker defends passage of new oil fund law, and in today's main newscast, let's tell you that civil society group continues to call for consultations on NRF legislation. Dr. Ashni Singh justifies 2-week review period for flawed oil fund law and says penalties for abuse covered under other legislation. The Speaker defends passage of new oil fund law. Housing Ministry initiates $4.4 billion in last-minute contracts. Get the full details of these stories and more in today's Kaieteur News.
Nothing in life is free, but the MyDigiCell app is. You don't need to be on a data plan to use the app. You can conveniently chat with Ruby or an agent for help. Check your account balance, activate a Prime bundle, or gift it to a friend. Send credit. Check the Georgetown and Burpees Bridge schedules. Activate a roaming plan. Play Shake to Win for cool prizes. So don't worry about a data plan, buddy. Download the MyDigiCell app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store today. Digicel, better together.
And now for the news in detail. With regard to the Natural Resource Fund Bill 2021, Senior Minister with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, has faced two major criticisms: the short time frame for consideration of the bill that inhibits input from the citizenry, and the absence of explicit penalties for misuse of the revenues. Dr. Singh said he believes that the bill was tabled in a reasonable time, especially when one considers the fact that it replicates more than 20 of the provisions in the previous legislation that was passed by the Granger government under the passage of the no-confidence motion. He said too that the bill is not one that is complex. The minister added that if the political opposition, which led a chaotic protest to obstruct the bill's passage, had any valid objections, it could have raised those via the tabling of amendments. Since no compelling arguments or contentions were made, the minister said there was no reason for the bill to be sent to a special select committee. As for the need for penalties in place, the finance minister noted that this is covered in other legislation. He noted that if there is any misuse of the money following approval from the House, penalties can be imposed under the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act.
And we now tell you that the Speaker of the National Assembly, Manzoor Nadir, yesterday defended as lawful the passage of the PPPC's Natural Resource Fund Bill 2021, saying that all of the ingredients required for its approval in the House had been met despite the commotion that disrupted the debate and vote on the critical piece of legislation. Nadir said that in order for the bill to be considered approved, there only needed to be a quorum for the sitting and for the mace to be in place. Opposition Member of Parliament Annette Ferguson, who was among the raucous provocateurs, grabbed the mace from its position. According to Nadir, there is another mace in the event the traditional mace could not be found to put in place whenever Parliament sits. According to Nadir, the terrorist-like mechanism employed by members of the opposition against the noble institution, National Assembly, cannot go unpunished.
In other news, NPTAB's office on Wednesday opened some $4.4 billion in contracts for infrastructural works for communities in Regions 2 and 3. The procuring entity for these projects is the CHNPA, which falls under the purview of the Ministry of Housing and Water, which is headed by Minister Colin Crowell. The communities scheduled for infrastructure works when these contracts are awarded are St. Joseph, Buxton, Charity and Onderneming in Region 2, and Mettenmeer-Zorg, Lenora, De Kinderen, De William and Edinburgh in Region 3. At the contract signing for the Eccles to Diamond 4-lane highway project, Crowell had mentioned that before the year ends, tenders would be opened for infrastructural works in Onderneming on the Essequibo coast to Diamond on the east bank of the Marara.
In other stories, we now tell you that the suspected killer of 28-year-old Dion Charles, who was killed execution style on Christmas Eve night in Albaistown, was on Wednesday nabbed by police in Suriname. On Tuesday, the police had issued a wanted bulletin for 19-year-old Ezekiel Hawker of Forshaw Street, Queenstown, Georgetown, after receiving information that he was involved in the man's death. Yesterday, Crime Chief Wendell Blanham, in a statement, noted that Hawker had been handed over to local investigators and was placed in police custody. He admitted to committing the crime. According to the statement, Hawker told investigators that on Christmas Eve night he shot and killed Charles because Charles had previously shot at him on 2 occasions.
And on another note, let's tell you that the Fiscal Management and Accountability Amendment Bill presented by Senior Minister responsible for Finance, Dr. Rashni Singh, was approved in the National Assembly late Wednesday night. The bill was approved by a majority vote of the ruling PPPC and thus was void of input from the members of the APNU-AFC who walked out of the House following a ruckus over the Natural Resource Fund bill. Minister Singh had made a final presentation on the bill, which is expected to strengthen and expedite the budget process for constitutional agencies and simultaneously preserve the independence of those agencies.
Moving on, we now tell you that of the 235 fire hydrants set to be inoperable around the capital city, a total of 151 were completely repaired at a cost of $40 million. This is according to Fire Chief Kalamadine Idu, who said that the sum of $40 million was allocated for the repairs of 151 fire hydrants. The repairs, he noted, have been completed and the second phase is expected to begin in January. The repairs, he said, would continue until all 235 of the inoperable hydrants around Georgetown are fully repaired. Out of the 600 fire hydrants that are located around Georgetown, 235 were found to be inoperable. According to Edu, the Guyana Fire Service could not afford the repairs through its budget sums and as a result had to resort to a supplementary provision. A total sum of $1.5 billion was allocated to the fire service in the 2021 national budget, and out of this, $18 million was slated to be used for the maintenance of infrastructures.
The time has now moved on to 12 hours 10. You're listening to Kaieteur Radio. We will return after the break.
This is GHK Lal inviting you to join me weekdays from Monday to Friday on the National Outlook for commentary on a range of issues. Immediately after the 12 noon and 7 p.m. newscasts on Kaieteur Radio at 99.1 FM and 99.5 FM. Looking forward to you sharing in the conversation.
Welcome back. Let us continue with the news. Guyana last year budgeted to collect through its recurrent sources of revenue, such as taxes, fees, and other such payments, $226.5 billion. The government last year, however, collected $230.4 billion in current revenue, or some $4 billion more than it had budgeted to receive. As such, it would mean that various categories of businesses and individuals doing business in Guyana would have forked over to the government some $4 billion more than it had anticipated. According to the AG, this has been a trend continuing over the past 3 years.
We now tell you that the PPPC indefensibly forcing the Natural Resource Fund bill through Parliament was done without a consultative process, despite its far-reaching consequences, despite civic opposition, and despite having a one-seat majority in Parliament. And the failure to consult on the new act is the most shocking violation of the expectation for consultation implied in Article 13 of the National Constitution. This is the view of a civil society group, Policy Forum Guyana, which yesterday scolded the government for not only failing to consult the nation on the approved NRF legislation, but also ignoring a petition it made for a pause in the consideration of the Natural Resources Act.
In other news, earlier this year, a motion of no confidence was tabled by the PPPC administration against the opposition leader, Joseph Harmon. However, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Manzoor Nadir, said that it will be thrown out. The Speaker noted that the same process that allowed for the opposition leader to be appointed would have to be followed for him to be removed. Against this backdrop, he said it is likely to be thrown out. The motion was tabled against Harmon by the government less than 48 hours after he filed a no-confidence motion against 2 sitting ministers. In the reasons outlined in the motion, among others, cites Harmon for his crucial and integral part of the process of undermining democracy.
In all the stories, a complaint has been lodged with the Ethnic Relations Commission over the racial and physical assault meted out to parliamentary staffer and personal assistant to the Speaker, Ian Macpherson, on Wednesday night during the chaos which ensued ahead of the passage of the controversial Natural Resource Fund bill. Macpherson was dragged out of the House by opposition parliamentarians in the National Assembly as he held on to the Speaker's mace, which they seized in the middle of the presentation of the bill. In a video which was circulated on Facebook shortly after the mace-grabbing incident, Macpherson could be seen on the floor of the conference room of the convention center, laying on his back, clasping the mace tightly to his chest. It was at this point of the recording that an opposition parliamentarian, who was later identified as Maureen Philadelphia, was seen standing over him and shouting a derogatory racial slur.
And now we move on to the page 7 of the Kaieteur News, dedicated to being blunt. With the passing of the NRF bill, there is the likelihood of greater risks, intensified tensions, and the possibility of flaring confrontation in this society. It is a society that needs only a touch to get out of control, since it is always on edge. The government, even at this stage, must listen to the concerns of a wide cross-section of this nation. Failure to do so could take Guyana into unknown territory. Please listen, Mr. President. Please hear, Mr. Vice President. Don't take us into the abyss. And with that, we've come to the end of today's main newscast. I'm Kevin Smith.
And I'm Amrita Koshal.
Thank you for being with us for the entire 2021, and we look forward to your company and support in 2022. Happy New Year's.
Want value for your advertising dollar? Then place your ads on Kaieteur Radio's newscasts. Streamed live on 6 different mediums, reaching hundreds of thousands. Advertise today and watch your dollar grow. Call us on 225-8465 or 226-8210 today.